start?
I did.
Oh, okay. Hi, welcome to our Saturday morning Riverside San Bernardino chapter of California Native Plant Society meeting and program. I'd just like to remind people that California Native Plant Society is an organization that's statewide, and we have, 37 chapters across the state in Baja California. Yeah, we cover a lot of really interesting territory. And we do have brochures in the back of the room for anybody that's not a member and thinks they might want to join. And those of you who are online, if you would like to join CNPS, just go to cnps.org and there's a join button. And you can also join at our events. We often have a QR code at special events like plant sales for joining at a discount. So I would first like to tell you about a couple of upcoming events that we're having, and also some things that are happening locally. This July, I believe the week of July 10th through 14th, the California Native Plant Society Vegetation group is going to be working on vegetation sampling and mapping in the San Bernardino Mountains, and there's going to be a special period of time. We don't have all the information yet, where CNPS members and interested public, that especially those that know plants in the mountains, are welcome to join in. It should be a lot of fun. I plan to be there, and we'll try recruiting people to come and help with that. You can learn a lot, and should be really interesting. And I think they're going to be working a little bit south of Lake Arrowhead on that trip, but I'm not absolutely sure. It might be over on the other side toward Big Bear. The other thing that's coming up is our next meeting, the third Saturday of June. Remember, that's going to be a field meeting, so it's going to be in person only. We won't be Zooming this. And Gina Richmond is going to lead us and show us some really cool restoration sites that she's been working on. And so please look at the MailChimp that should be coming out hopefully in the next week with the details about that particular field trip meeting. And it will be a RSVP one, because we're going to have to limit the number of people to about 25 so we can handle them all. So that will be really important for you to look at your MailChimp or Facebook or Instagram, however you're getting our notices, and note that it is reservation required, and we will give members priority reservation. So the details will be coming out really soon. Another thing that's coming up is this weekend on Sunday, which is tomorrow, at 6 p.m. in the Box Springs, Box Springs Park in Riverside. Is the county park, regional park, actually not a regional park, but Box Springs Park and Reserve. There's going to be a 50th anniversary celebration over on the Hidden Valley. Oh, I don't have the street right, but Katie, I think, was getting the notice out on Facebook and Instagram for us, and it's come out on a number of different local platforms as well. And people are invited to attend that 50th anniversary celebration. And very important members of this community, including members of CNPS, were involved in establishing that, getting that park, land purchased and established 50 years ago, especially Richard and Jane Block, Pete Dangerman, and others. And there's probably a lot more I can say, but I won't. I think I'd like to get going with our program. Today we have a very special program. We have our Conservation Program Director, Nick Jensen, here to talk to us. Nick has a real varied past. He actually got his first degree at UC Davis in environmental horticulture, and then went on to get a PhD at Claremont, or graduate school, or That's, yeah. And he did the first flora of the large Tejon Ranch area. And there are a lot of really, really cool native plants in that region, just amazing flower fields. He did work on Streptanthus. He's actually written up new species of Streptanthus from the San Bernardino Mountains. How many? Two new species.
I could start out with a story.
Okay, so he'll talk about this a little bit. So he does a lot of organizing through CNPS. He deals with our litigation that shoots through CNPS and coordinating with other organizations on many conservation issues. I'll let him tell you a little bit more because you probably are tired of hearing from me, but I would like to bring Nick up here to start his program. Thank you.
So to make sure that I'm seeing this, are folks online seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. So all good. Thank you. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here this morning. Obviously, I love coming and giving talks at chapters. Whenever I do a talk for a chapter, it seems like there's like some wonderful personal connections, either with the people or with the area that I get to think about when I'm getting ready to give a talk. And I'm really happy that Arlie mentioned my work on Streptanthus. It was a bit unexpected. I started working on the perennial Streptanthus, or the jewel flowers, based on a plant that I had discovered in Tejon Ranch, which I ended up describing as a new species. But as you go about the process of trying to figure out whether the plant that you think might be new to science is new, you go around and you collect evidence, morphological evidence. These days you are hard pressed to do it without doing some genetic sequencing, and so that involved me looking into all of the plants that the Streptanthus that are perennials or long lived, or maybe like at least biennial, and that took me, and which includes in Southern California Cordatus, Bernardinus, Campestris, and then the new species that I ended up describing as Madeirosii after one of my mentors from Tejon Ranch, actually. But I'll tell this story. This is going to be a little bit longer than I'd hoped, but it's okay. I think it's cool because it took this whole process of discovery took place in the San Bernardino Mountains. I went up with a friend, of course, with our collecting permits and everything to collect. Is everything okay? Yeah. Okay, cool. I can also step back. So we went up to look at Streptanthus campestris, or I think they call it southern jewel flower, and which had been collected extensively from the San Bernardino Mountains. And so we went and visited several populations there in the San Bernardino, kind of the area south of Big Bear Lake. And we camped up there. We had visited several populations. And so that was my initial thought of like what this plant was, of the Streptanthus campestris. Then we immediately that day we drove south to the Santa Rosa Mountains, where there were other populations of this plant. It's a rare plant. A lot of the collections hadn't been visited for many years, but that's irrelevant to the story. So we walked out of the truck and we look at the next population of the southern jewel flower campestris in the Santa Rosa Mountains, and my friend and I, Chris Winchell and I, were like, no. We maybe used a little bit unpolite words. Are these two things the same thing? We had gone from one population and to the next population south, and in a different mountain range, and there was no way in heck that those two were the same thing. So that plant became, so the type of the species is near Campo in San Diego County. The plants in Santa Rosa Mountains are the same as the plants in San Diego and then down into Baja. So basically, long story short, the plants in the San Bernardino Mountains are different genetically, morphologically, and everything else, habitat-wise. There isn't a bit of similarity between the two species. And I ended up describing that as Streptanthus junii after my grandmother, who is the person who got me into gardening. So anyway, that took place here in it is that direction, that direction. I'm terrible with directions, by the way. I have no sense of directions. In fact, my wife will like try and test me, like, which way is north, and I'm like, she's like no. Anyway, okay, so I have a lot to cover today. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'll talk a little bit about where we are in the world and why it's so special and why it's important for us to conserve what it remains of California and its flora. Then we'll talk. Then there'll be a section on the CNPS Conservation Program, current threats, what's going on. It's a bit heavy, unfortunately, unless you have not been paying attention, and you've been able to avoid the threats to the environment that have been happening in the past few months. Then some advocacy support or just tools that we're using to combat these threats to the flora, that our nascent Advocacy Corps, which one of my staff, my colleagues, is leading the development of, our Conservation Toolkit, and then we'll end with a palette cleanser, a little bit of a display of the new Wildflowers of California book, which I was a part of, and so we'll get going. So California, this is probably not the crowd that I need to convince. This is really preaching to the choir. We live in an incredibly diverse and special place with regards to plants and habitats. Highest diversity of plants by a state in the nation. It isn't even that close. Lots of endemics or plants that occur nowhere else in the world. So if they're lost here, they're gone. We have the most diverse county county flora in the country, which is San Diego, not too far from here. And then if you see from Bruce Stein's work down there in the table, there's really high levels of risk, high levels of extinction, and all that stuff, which led to California or the California floristic province portion of California, or the part of California that is experiences the Mediterranean climate, being designated as one of the 36 global biodiversity hotspots. And all of these areas are places where there's tremendous amounts of diversity, coupled with lots of endemism or species that are restricted to these areas and high levels of threat. So it is not, oh, I did have one animation in there. There it is. It's not hyperbolic to say when we're talking about the flora of California that we are it's of worldwide importance that we conserve our flora. And this is just a little bit on the floristic province. It extends into Oregon, a little bit in Nevada, and a chunk into Baja. Tons of diversity there. 42% endemism, just fabulous. And this is a portion of California that has Mediterranean or California adjacent states and countries that have a Mediterranean climate. But of course, we don't just have the Mediterranean climate influence portion of California. Our deserts in and of themselves are tremendously special, tremendously diverse, also with lots of endemism, also with incredibly high levels of threats in many areas, and still lots more to discover. And I included one of my favorite plants that I've ever had a chance to see, or Thorn's buckwheat, which is in the New York mountains. I got to see that a number of years ago. Just a tremendously beautiful plant, and I love all the wild buckwheats of California and their relatives. So that's one of my favorite groups. So, okay, who is California? So who is CNPS Conservation? It's a weird question. But really, this is where I wanted to center this talk onto you, or maybe it will be you if it isn't you yet. But CNPS is a special organization in that we have there are a lot of environmental organizations that claim supporters and members and that kind of thing, but rarely will you find an organization in California or even elsewhere where there are so many of you who do lots of actions on behalf of the flora and on behalf of this organization. I just went through my phone and pulled some photos of there's Orchid. Orchid, you're actually in a lot of these photos. I think you're in the one for Centennial too. But so this is just an example that CNPS members get out and do things, and and are not just going to events and where you're taking photos, writing comment letters and providing testimony and all those types of things. Maybe you aren't in that one. I don't know. I thought I might have seen you in there. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to the staff that I get to have the opportunity to work with. I am, as Arlie said, I'm the director of the conservation program, which means I get to work with these talented 3 individuals who put up with me and do untold amounts of work. And this is not just what staff does here, like this side of this is what CNPS does, not just what the staff does, although we do all these things as well. Commenting on projects, doing some advocacy for public land management, increasingly a lot of work on wildfire, some strategic litigation for when the commenting process on CEQA and NEPA are borne out to this full extent and there's nothing else that we can do. In recent years, and this chapter has done a tremendous amount of work on this, is working towards permanent protections for our public lands. I'd say, I don't know if it's, well, I won't be too hyperbolic, but it is almost okay to probably say that it's possible that the new Chuckwalla National Monument would not have happened without some of the efforts of this chapter, especially Katie Barrows. And it is so I've worked a lot on that in recent years, a little bit more on Chuckwalla later in my incoming slides. And then some, and we work with the public affairs department at CNPS on legislative and policy advocacy, including occasionally sponsoring bills. So there are opportunities for you to get involved and learn more. These are just these are some of the regular meetings that we have that we and volunteers host, members host. Conservation chairs calls the first Tuesday. We have a wildfire community. It's the 3rd Tuesday, where if you're interested in wildfire related issues, impacts to native plants, please join us. We have a third Wednesday of the month discussion on the impacts of solar energy development on habitats. There's a cannabis call on the impacts of cannabis cultivation. That one's been going a long time. It's the first Friday of the month, bright and early in the morning, and then we'll talk more about Advocacy Corps in the newly formed Advocacy Corps in coming slides. And then this is just if you are interested in doing this work, we're here to help. Conservation advocacy work needs you. Nothing happens from the perspective of conservation unless people speak out for. Can I move this? Move it and smallify it. Okay, is that better? All right, cool. So basically, conservation is a people-powered endeavor. Pretty much no places, well, essentially the plants and habitats don't speak for themselves. Nothing gets saved unless someone speaks out for it, essentially. And then you saw the team that I get to be a part of. It's 4 of us. We have no capacity. We have some capacity. That's not the weird thing. We have some capacity, and but the issues that the flora of California faces across the entirety of the state is impossible to cover with 4 people. So we need you, and we are here to help you to do the important work of CNPS from a conservation advocacy perspective. And that involves so first of all, if you know of something that's happening and that is of impact to your local habitats, well, you probably would talk to Arlie and other folks about that, or Aaron, or whoever who is on the conservation team here at the chapter. But if you ever need help collaborating on or writing comment letters or just help connections with other organizations, any level of support, we're here to help. And so, my email will be in the talk as well. So, but yes, this is appeal for folks to reach out to us. You may have heard some news of this. CNPS has gone through a process led by staff to develop these big campaigns that are consistent with our mission and vision and strategic plan, but it's a little bit more granular. These campaigns are a little bit more granular and help us to guide what we can do as an organization, the actions that we do as an organization. A lot of the work that I'm fortunate to be able to do is within the realm of the Saving What Matters Most campaign. And so that's just a kind of a news item, and also just like a way of framing the work that we also do. A lot of it is under the Stewarding Nature Under Threat campaign as well, or the way that we are. I could be louder. Okay, watch out. Or closer, but then if I'm closer, then they stop being able to see me, huh? I will be louder. Okay, cool. So I'll move on too. And so I've made several appeals to folks getting involved, because I would say that there has probably never been, at least in my time as doing this work for about 8 years, but probably for others of you who have a longer tenure watching what's going on in the environment and doing advocacy, there's probably never been a more threatening time to especially to public lands. That has largely surfaced since the beginning of the year with the change in administration. We're tracking tons and tons of potential threats and actual threats to the environment and regulations that are taking place. These take the form of funding freezes and layoffs, which will affect the federal government's ability to manage its own land. I'll talk a little bit more about it in subsequent slides. There is a real risk of reductions in protections for recently conserved lands, especially our national monuments. There's a very troubling trend via the process of rhetoric and actual action in Congress and the current executive branch that sees our public lands more so as assets in a balance sheet than valued as something that is part of all of our heritage and in support of those plants and animals that can't speak for themselves. And they see that this as trillions of dollars of assets that they could potentially liquidate and sell and turn into profit, or areas that could be extracted for their resources. This is unfortunate and troubling in many ways. You probably have seen in the news. Fortunately, this did not directly impact California, but in the process of budget reconciliation, I'm not going to go into the details of that because that would require a lot more background. But it is essentially the way that Congress deals with its balance sheet. The House Committee of Natural Resources has been requested to come up with ways to raise money to essentially fund cuts that the current administration wants to see. And one of the ways that they are proposing to do this is to sell off approximately 500,000 acres of land in Utah and Nevada. It didn't affect California yet, but this is a terrible precedent. There's been increasing evidence that the federal government would like to attempt to solve the housing crisis by disposing of, especially of BLM lands. So, and that is currently targeting Nevada and Utah. There is no reason, if they get away with this in those two states, that they won't come for California as well. So we are actively concerned about that. And so, not to be an alarmist, and unfortunately, this is real. It's a real threat to our public lands, and so there's actually efforts to try and get that stripped from the current version of the budget, that organizations like CNPS and citizens like you can comment on. There are some disturbing regulatory and policy changes as well. You may have heard, I think we have done blog posts and or social media posts, if you're following the CNPS social media accounts, on several of these. There's changes to NEPA. There are threats to the Endangered Species Act, which are currently under a comment period. There's some land transfers. There's all kinds of stuff happening. So this is something that if you get our CNPS e-news, which I think many of you do, if you are actually if you're members, and or if you signed up to receive them, and our recent one that went out, I think it went out on Thursday, has all kinds of information on some of these threats, including ways to comment on the Endangered Species Act redefinition of harm, which is an open comment period that closes on the 19th. And so look to the CNPS e-news for information on some of these, and also CNPS social media if you're on social media. This is definitely might affect lands in Southern California, but is especially of concern to our Sierra Nevada and North Coast national forests. There's a effort to increase timber production on all national forests by 25%. There is a disturbing piece of legislation called the Fix Our Forest Act, which allows for fuel treatment, and that is very broadly defined, using exemptions from NEPA, so exemption from environmental review for up to 10,000 acres. I started my botany career working for the Forest Service. It was formative for me. I had great respect for the work that we did. I was just a field person going out and doing surveys for NEPA projects, for projects that were being reviewed under NEPA. Back then, we would do EISs, or these very detailed environmental documents, for very small areas, few hundred acres of treatment. And now they're attempting to get away with not doing any review, essentially any review for up to 10,000 acres. And that's huge. So this is all just to say that there is a lot of concern for federal forest lands. On the heels of our loss, the obviously tragic Los Angeles fires of earlier this year, there's a lot of things that are happening. There's been a state of emergency in response to those wildfires that have exempted a wide range of wildfire recovery and fuel reduction projects from the California Environmental Quality Act, which is the way that we're able to comment on projects. Very recently, the state issued an environmental protection plan, which outlines the practices that the Natural Resources Agency, or a state agency that will oversee this, will need to do in order to not have to go through CEQA, or the full environmental review process, which has public comment in it. So there will be no public comment on a lot of these projects. We're in the process of writing a comment letter that will hopefully will have some impact on this and maybe influence some changes, so that there is less wishy-washy language in this, what's called the EPP, or Environmental Protection Plan. This is probably going forward. There's no stopping this necessarily, but we're hoping that we maybe can make some of the wishy-washy languages include instead of should, must, because shall, because there's just so much too much wiggle room as far as we're concerned. Sorry, this is a real bummer. But there will be brighter slides ahead. And then I mentioned, actually, I guess it's okay that you're a talk from a conservation person and there being some points of motivation, I suppose. There's there is an active review of national monuments. I mentioned that this chapter, the Riverside San Bernardino chapter, was instrumental, as well as the Mojave Desert chapter, along with staff and volunteers from all over, members from all over, in establishing several new national monuments or expanding national monuments in California. In Biden's the last year of Biden's presidency. These included Chuckwalla, a very precious place in the northern part of the state called Satitla Highlands, or around the area that is of Medicine Lake, and then the expansion of the San Gabriel Mountains and the expansion of Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monuments. There was an executive order by the president that directed the federal agencies to review all national monuments, marine and land national monuments. And there was a deadline of February 18th. It's come and gone, so we don't know what the review determined. But the President Trump in his first term did reduce the size of a couple of national monuments in Utah. That went to court, and then those monuments were restored to their original extent by President Biden. I think of greatest concern are the national monuments that have mining and oil and gas resources in them. But I will say that Chuckwalla has been on the list of the monuments that is at risk. Now we think that there is, most legal scholars will say that the Antiquities Act does not give the president the power to revoke national monument status or reduce monuments in size. That's what was being argued about with Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante Monument. Those cases were never borne out in court because Biden was able to reduce the size or restore those monuments back to their original extent before they went to the Supreme Court. So there's a concern that could be, there's unknowns as far as what will happen in court. So that's like what would happen if there was a reduction in the size of national monuments or reduction in protections, that would be litigated and it would go through the courts for sure. There is a second threat to national monuments, the piece in bold there on the slide. On May 1st, there was a lawsuit filed by a organization out of Texas, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, sued the federal government on behalf of the Blue Ribbon Coalition and Daniel Tarango, who is a person with mining claims within Chuckwalla National Monument, essentially alleging that the Biden administration unlawfully established the national monument and that the Antiquities Act was unlawfully used to create this new national monument, which is, of course, of central importance to your chapter here. That was filed in May. And so there is an active process. So this is essentially a conservative group or groups suing the conservative federal government. And there's a little bit of a concern of this being a fox guarding the henhouse type of situation, in that the Department of Interior and Secretary Burgum will be faced with defending against a lawsuit, which kind of is maybe not the best scenario. So there are conversations underway as to how the state of California and Native American tribes and potentially environmental organizations can help in the defense, help the federal government to defend itself against this lawsuit. To say not too much more about that. Oh boy, that is not good at all. I don't. Hopefully, that's just one slide. Oh, Huh, that's interesting. Maybe we switch it to switch it to the PDF version of my talk. Okay, maybe. Mm, here, let me I think I have do you have, yeah. Hold on one second. We'll get this going. This is within our capability. Okay. Yeah, that's really weird. Of all things. Yeah. Okay, so I think I need to, do I need to stop sharing then? Probably.
Yeah.
Oh, I would. That would be incredibly brilliant of you if you could. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's see. We'll be back on in a second here. Okay. And I just need to find Zoom and reshare, right? Voila. Okay. And then the right one, though, PDF. How about that? Are we seeing a page 18? Is there a way to do this as a presentation? Yeah, we'll get there.
There you go.
And then I'm gonna have to split up. And then is there a way to advance it by page? Okay.
Great.
Okay, I'm there.
That looks good.
Pretty good? All right. You know, Orchid, when you said to me, like, make sure you save it as a PDF, I was like, oh, I don't need to do that. And oh, I can even use the button for that. This is great. Oh, this is fabulous. Okay, we're back on. So the other thing that we're doing is continuing to track what's going on with regard to legislation. We track legislation at the federal level, although as it's a little bit less within our capacity and in our agency, I suppose. But we do a lot of work with our public affairs team. Leave O'Keefe is the lead for this, on tracking state bills that are introduced into the legislature. And so there's been a lot of bills introduced this year that are of interest to CNPS, dozens, in fact. Well, there are dozens of wildfire related bills that have been introduced. Some are good, some are not so good. We've been really doing a lot of work to analyze bills and then to take positions on them and write letters that are either saying, you know, thanks for doing this bill, it's a good bill, or saying maybe this is the way that your bill could be improved, or bills that we just outright can't support. There's a really kind of a neat bill that was introduced by Senator Bennett that would designate Arctostaphylos glauca as our state shrub. We weren't involved in the selection process to identify which shrub would be the best state shrub. I love big berry manzanita. Don't get me wrong; it's a wonderful plant, and I think it's a great. I mean, obviously, no complaints that it's a manzanita, and I think it's good. Why not? We could have probably, I guess, if CNPS got together and said what shrub should be the state shrub, we probably would have had all kinds of debates and arguments. So I'm really glad that it just was. So we're supporting that. Why wouldn't we? But then there are things that we're not so happy about. There are multiple bad CEQA bills, the worst of which is SB 607. So CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, in case you don't know, it's our environmental bill of rights. It basically just says if you're going to harm the environment, you must disclose to the public what the impacts of your project are going to be. And then it ensures that decision makers, the cities and counties that make decisions on projects, are informed. Why is SB 607 so problematic? It is for a whole host of projects, from housing to from just almost every project under CEQA. It would change the standard by which the level of the standard required to determine whether or not CEQA is required or not, which means that if this bill goes forward, a lot of projects which currently are reviewed under CEQA would be essentially exempt from having to go through the process. It's a bill that is geared towards limiting public access to information and public review of projects, in a kind of a I would say a bit of a sneaky way of calling it, in the name of promoting affordable housing, which it is way beyond that. We have an action alert on this in the said e-news that came out last. We've done action alerts on this, and there's plenty of communication about this in the CNPS social media platform and emails and such. Yes, I'm just gonna leave it at that because I'm already 40 minutes in. My goodness. So what can you do? Well, there's a lot of requests now for people to do things on behalf of the environment. There are tons of efforts to get people to call their elected representatives in Congress, so federal reps, and so look for emails from us and action alerts and those type of things, and follow the instructions on how to do this. There may be opportunities for folks to contact their local or like state elected representatives as well. That could be very impactful on things like that CEQA bill, SB 607. If that makes it through the Senate, we're going to be really concerned that it could make it through the Assembly as well. So which means, like, if you see us doing action alerts to say, please contact your elected officials, then that would be a point of something that we would really want you to do. Okay, moving on. We got through the conservation piece. So next portion now is to talk about Advocacy Corps, the newly formed Advocacy Corps, and our Conservation Toolkit. This is my dog. His name is Fig, and Fig is hanging out in our meadow in our backyard that we planted with sedge, with carex, native carex. So this is a relatively new thing. Our Advocacy Corps. It's an initiative to strengthen the CNPS, essentially our grassroots power. We have tons of power in CNPS that already exists. So this is not to diminish what already exists at the state, at the chapter level, but as with any superpower, which I do believe our members are our superpower from a conservation perspective, we would like to make the superpower even more super. And how will we do this? Well, we want to increase the skill, but we want to do skill building, provide people who are budding conservation advocates with more resources and a network of other people to contact. And I'll talk about how we plan to do this. I will say I want to give complete credit. There are a number of us who have thought about this as an idea, but the person who's really making this happen is a person on my team named Karah Fisher. Karah has been with CNPS about a year and has already done all kinds of great things. But this is really Karah's lead project, and if you're interested, you'll probably get in getting involved. You'll have the opportunity to work with Karah. But the goal of this is to mobilize supporters, provide a platform for information sharing, and making sure that folks are prepared, they're educated, and have the resources to engage. So when we say, hey, we want you to connect with your local representative, or your your federal representative in Congress, that you actually know how to do this. So it's not just like, oh, I don't know how, like CNPS says contact your congressperson. Well, I don't know how to do that. So this would be so there will be opportunities for increased collaboration across chapters, peer mentorship, ability to gain new skills, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. Better communication about things that need to happen, and some of this is geared towards generating the next generation of CNPS advocates. It's no big mystery to anyone that there are many of our most active members are also not just out of college. Let's just say. I'm not going to say old, because that old is just like that's a labeling, but there are a lot of people, and then there is a little bit of a difference in the way that I think that we're learning that that those younger folks like to interact with organizations. Really, these younger folks are not as likely to join organizations and pay for memberships in an organization like CNPS, but they are dyed-in-the-wool supporters of the CNPS on social media. We have like 65,000 followers on Instagram. These are all people who like our posts and will respond if we ask them to do things for us. But we only have 13,000 members, paying members of CNPS. That's many times the number of members that we have. And so if we can activate some of those people and maybe actually bring some of them in as members as well, but even if they're just supporters who are doing things when we ask them to do them, that's pretty awesome. So, okay, anyway, the Advocacy Corps, who's involved? Initial development has been a small group of advisors, including, you'll see down here, that's Aaron Eccles, one of your chat. Aaron, you're your conservation chair, right? He's sick. Aaron is wonderful. Anyway, so but we're in the process now of expanding this now. So we went through a process of several meetings with this handpicked group of folks from around the state, not to exclude anyone, but just to make sure that we were getting it right. And so we've had several meetings with these folks, and now it's time to going, like, we're now going live with this. But we are activating in 2 tracks at the same time. As I have talked to you a little bit about, there are some real active threats. We realize to habitats and plants in California, we realize that we have to do some of this first, the top lines, the action alerts and advocacy days. A little bit more on that in a second. Some action hours, maybe where we're going to bring people in on webinars, talk to you about issues that need action. And then and this is something that other orgs have done to great effect, where we say, we get a webinar together like this one, but imagine if this one was like, I had given you the talk about the issue of the day, and then I said, okay, here's a tool, here is how you look up your elected representative. Does everybody have their elected representatives looked up? Yes. Okay, here's your script. Now everybody go and spend the next 20 minutes calling your elected representative and telling them about this issue. We'll come back in 20 minutes and tell us how it went. And so instead of us like doing this thing where we're like, hey, contact your elected representative, and you may or may not do it, we could have 60 people in the line online essentially making calls in real time. So that's something that organizations are doing. We'd like to do that. And also we're in the process, of course, list building, not so, it sounds really marketing based, but we just need more people to contact and more people to know that we know actually want to do this stuff. But in the long term, it'll include webinars. We're going to do our first webinar this month, some skills building and education, and then just end activation. So this is our first webinar. So if you are interested, we are going to have our first webinar of the Advocacy Corps on May 28th from 6 to 7 p.m. It's a little bit later in the day It's geared to so that people who have day jobs can actually hopefully attend. It's going to be hosted by or presenting will be our current lobbyist Kim Delfino and our past lobbyist Vern Gehring. And it's going to be how to build advocacy, how to build relationships essentially with our with your elected representatives at all levels. The exact content is still in draft form because it's going to be Kim and Vern doing their magic. So we can, I will make sure if you're interested in this that you have this information, or you can email me and I can send you the registration links. And then the second thing we're doing, which is part of this nascent Advocacy Corps work, on the mentioning, of course, that there's a lot of bills related to wildfire that have been introduced into the legislature. We decided that we were going to do, I don't know if CNPS has done this in quite a long time or ever. We're going to do an advocacy day, a lobbying day at the Capitol on June 9th. So chapter council, the next chapter council meeting is in Coloma, so in El Dorado County, which is really close to Sacramento. So the Monday after chapter council, we're going to do this advocacy day at the Capitol, where members will be able to go around and talk to staff and maybe even some actual elected officials about what CNPS thinks about wildfire and why like, we believe that some of the what is being proposed as new laws are not exactly in line with what we understand to be the latest science. And so basically putting our science-based advocacy into action at the Capitol. If you're interested and possibly would be, able to travel to Sacramento for June 9th, please contact Karah, or contact me. There is even the possibility of some funding support for folks who are able to travel. And so, but please, if you are interested in this, let me know like as soon as possible, because we're in the process of getting those meetings scheduled for the June 9th. And it would be really helpful to know if folks and are interested in attending. And in particular, if you are from a particularly important Senate or Assembly district, so that actually we can request a meeting with a senator and or assembly member. And so they love hearing from their constituents, not just like people who are just like, me, who will be a guy in a suit who works for an organization out of Sacramento. You are way more important than I am. So if you're able to attend or potentially want to attend, let me know as soon as possible. All right, on to the Conservation Advocacy Toolkit. This is the address here, ct.cnps.org. We put this out, I think, last spring with the help of donors. Denise and Henry Louie, many people contributed to this at our last conference in 2022, and then also the Switzer Foundation, who made this possible. Right now, the toolkit is heavily focused on CEQA commenting. It is a tool that basically shares information on how to write comment letters and how to engage in the CEQA process. It includes a comment letter database, explainer videos and in-depth articles, and a guide to how to actually write comment letters. What it will be in the future, I hope, is an organizing place for resources in line with our Advocacy Corps, which could include how to do things like, building relationship with decision makers. Like, for example, the webinar that we're going to hold on the 9th or the 28th of this month can become a video that is posted here on this website, and so on and so forth. An ability and live tracking of legislation, so that instead of me just saying there's lots of bills that we need help on, what if instead of that we had like a list of the bills and saying the actions that are needed at a given time on the bill? So you could go on the website and say, oh, there's this bill that is running through the process that needs phone calls, and we have like, here's what we need you to do, and here's how you do it. Mechanisms for organizing and how to actually to increase our effectiveness. So just basically more tools. So yeah, this is what we're hoping for. So the toolkit includes some videos on how to get started, explainer videos that are like these animated videos that should enable anyone to do that, to get to jump in and not feel so scared at writing comment letters. And then in the future, maybe it'll include similar things on how to, like, explainer videos on how to have a successful legislator meeting and those type of things. So I'm excited about this. So this is, focused on CEQA so far, as I said. These are some of the, the resources that are available, ct.cnps.org, once again. Just explainer videos, resources on how to write comment letters. So anyway, there's a comment letter database, so which we continually want to add to. So it's one of those things that my Brendan, who works with me, he's like, I would really love time to work on adding letters to the database. And it's, if only we had more hours in the day. But the idea is that you can filter a set of already submitted comment letters on various things like issue areas or types of comment letters. And for instance, here it's like, it's, what is it? Energy, land use and planning, wildfire, those type of things. So say you want to write a letter on, on renewable energy project in your area, you could filter on that and get some sample letters that have been written by staff or chapter members. There's some real world stories on the impact of CEQA and blog posts and stuff like that. So it links to other things that CNPS is doing. And so that's there's a ton of information in this website. It's not just for introductory folks who are only written a couple of comment letters, who have never done it. There's stuff for people who are more at the intermediate level, lots of practical tips and tools, lots of background on CEQA, and just a lot of depth for help in writing comment letters. And of course, we're here all along the way. If you are wanting to do this, that we're here to help as well. All right. This that one. And then do you normally post your presentations online?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Oh, sorry. Jeez. ct.cnps.org. Yeah. All right. All right. So I promise that's the last of the kind of meaty things. Now you've eaten your lunch. Now you get to have your dessert, which is something that's actually much more light in nature, which is talking about the new book that CNPS worked on. Oh, voila! And we'll pass this around. I apologize. I think that I missed an email that asked me to bring books to sell, and it is okay. But this is available. It's available. Like, you can buy it online at the CNPS webpage. You can go to an online bookseller of your choice. Hopefully you can get it at an independent local bookstore. Would be even better than the online seller. But hey, it's fine. It's fine either way. There's this book. I was living down here in 2019. I was living in Claremont, I think, and we got this email from Timber Press. They're like, we would love for CNPS to work on one of our field guides for the Wildflowers of California. And we're like, should we say yes to this? And I say yes to a lot of things. That's why I'm here on a Saturday. I mean, it's like, so yeah. So anyway, so we said yes to this project, and fast forward 5 years, and so this person here became the lead author of the book. She's my wife. That's Sandy. She's also a botanist. I guess that is implied by the fact that she was the lead author on a wildflower book. But we ended up working with a lot of people on the book who became authors. But Sandy did most of the work. Like this is like 80%, and then the rest of this is like 20%. So it was really Sandy's book. The author is CNPS though. But this is a book that is not for, well, it's for everyone. I think it's a beautiful book, actually. I'm gonna pass it around. We have something for everyone. I will just look at it because I think the photos that were chosen are really pretty. It includes 900 species in California. Let me tell you, the process of, there's about 5,100 or 5,200 species in California. And the, is that all natives though? I think, well, anyway, I'll just, whatever. 5,100 native species. Choosing 900 out of the diversity of plants in California was really hard, really, really hard. And there was no shortage of debate. There was, I will say, we're in Southern California, so I'll say it. There were some of the Northern California people who worked on the book. They were like, there's too many Southern California plants in there. And I did a lot of the selection of plants. And I was living down here, and I've done work all over the state, but I've just done a ton of graduate work down here in SoCal. So it made sense. I was like, oh yeah, we have to include all these plants. So then there was a whittling down process. It was difficult to whittle it down. It's part of the Timber Press Field Guide series. And this is what it looks like. Well, some of you are seeing it in real life. That's a 2-page spread. I think it turned out beautifully. I'll talk a little bit more about photo selection in the subsequent slides, but you can see that each plant includes at least one photo. Sometimes there's an inset photo that shows the plant in its if the plant is shown in its habitat. We worked really hard to choose the photos at a perspective that actually was how you would view them in nature. Like I love macro shots of plants. It's one of the things that I enjoy, but often that's not the best way to identify a plant unless, like especially small things. So Sandy especially worked really hard to try and find the right photos for each plant. This is just an example of what is included. Here's Great Valley Phacelia. Includes information on on just like habitat. The thing is, like the text here, these like brief text descriptions, we tried to write them so they're interesting. If you pick up most introductory wildflower books, it's like a plant species description in shorthand, which is of no use really, I think, to most introductory people who are picking up a wildflower book. It's in that information is in there too, like plant height and how leaves are arranged and stuff like that. But we try to this example. This annual produces one of the most spectacular wildflower displays in California. When the conditions are favorable, the clay soils of the carrizo plain are covered in its blossoms. It's more like we tried to actually include something for each plant that is kind of more interesting, so that like maybe you're in your tent in the carrizo plain and you're reading this and you're like, oh, isn't that nice, or whatever. Anyway, we have maps, distribution maps for each plant that are based on collection records. That was an interesting process to work on those. I think the maps are pretty cool. It shows you the range of the plant for each of the plants. Some of the guiding principles were like when a person is on a trail, hiking down a trail, and they're going to look at a plant, they won't know whether it's a classic wildflower or not, or maybe it's a small shrub. They're going to wonder what that plant is. So, our hope is that anybody who's walking down a trail in California will see a plant and hopefully be able to, assuming they're not, not noticing the dingo fights necessarily. They're noticing the things that are big and showy. That hopefully that's in the book. So most of the plants in the book are wildflowers in the classic sense, meaning they're annuals and herbaceous perennials. But we include some very common showy shrubs and also non-native plants. Because like I said before, persons who just picked up the Wildflower book at the National Park bookstore, hopefully there isn't Spanish room in the national park, but there might be. They're just going to see the plant with showy yellow flowers and wonder, hey, what's that? The hope is that that's who this is for. Okay, yeah, most wildflower books. So this is talking about the organization of the book. Most wildflower books are organized by color and petal number and floral symmetry and petal fusion. I would argue not the easiest way for beginners to understand plants. So we did a little bit different. We organized it by color, and then, and this is like, I'll show you another thing that we did. We organized it by color, and then by family, genus, and species, which hopefully provides a little bit more utility for folks that are a little bit more advanced, who actually understand how the plant kingdom is organized. So, for example, if you are able to get yourself to the fact that you have something that looks like a calochordus or another, showy monocot type plant, you'll get to you'll be able to get there to like the plants that are closely related to one another in a family or in a genus, or multiple species within a genus. And one of the ways we did this is what we used is a flower. If you look in the first part of the book, it's called a photo key. We poached this from an author of wildflower books named Laird Blackwell, who produced a number of really good wildflower books. Like, I think he's a community college professor, and in his books he did this, and we're like, that's really cool. So in the front of the book, if you know nothing, you should be able to open your book to a photo key where you say, hey, I have an orange flower. Hey, it looks like a fiddleneck. Or hey, it looks like one of these, like a desert mariposa lily. And you should be able to get to a plant or something, your plant or something close to it, just by looking at a key of photos. I would love to hear how people have used this book and see if it actually is useful to them in that regard, or how this part of the book is useful in this regard. I have a PhD in botany, and here we've produced, and so does Sandy, and so do the people who are authors are the kind of people who we're the ones who produced it. So it's almost hard to know like how people will use a book that you've produced. And the reviews I think have been relatively favorable so far. People like the book. I think it's just pretty in any case. The book includes other things in the front matter, is like stuff on biogeography and vegetation and threats to the flora and some. So there's a biogeography section. So if you're wondering about the biogeographic context, biogeographical context of the area that you're in, some information on vegetation, some areas to go see wildflower, see shows of wildflowers. There's a botany section. So you don't really need to have any pre-knowledge of plants in order to use the book, but we included a section on just how plants grow and how plants are arranged, morphologically speaking, description of plant families. This was one of the most tedious sections to write, let me tell you. Timber Press required it. They're like, you need to do plant families. We're like, we don't want to, because I don't think people will really read them. But hey, it's there now. And then there's a chapter-led section on rare species. I think 18 chapters submitted these little vignettes. They're a little bit larger. They're in the front of the book, that have more information than the descriptions, which talk about not only about the plants that are the rare plants that are of importance to the chapter, but also like what the chapters have done to help these plant populations. So here's like an example of one of the entries there on the Eureka Dunes evening primrose, about like the chapter volunteers work to monitor populations and do weed control and all kinds of stuff. So kind of a little, just kind of paying homage to the great work that the chapters do. It includes 2,200 photos. This was the most tedious process and this is what Sandy spent a lot of time doing. Sandy's she works for a consulting firm now, but she was doing a bunch of teaching at the time for community colleges. And so we were doing this during the pandemic. It was a great pandemic project, by the way. But the thing is there are some plants, in order to get the right photo, we would have, there's as many as 50 plant photos that we would look through for a single plant. And then getting the permissions from the photographers, because it was really crowdsourced, the photos. Like you see that the Steve Matson had 239 photos. Aaron's there. Aaron had top 10, 69 photos. 60 photographers featured in the book, 60 plus. And so these are like CNPS members and supporters from around the state, just submitting their photos for the book, and then the process of getting permission forms for all of these photos. Oh my gosh. And it's dedicated to several people who are no longer with us that were central to some of the authors. But in particular for Sandy and I, it was Jessica Roscoe, who went to grad school with us and tragically passed away a few years ago. We dedicated the book in part to Jessica. Because that's, as I said, CNPS is about people. It's about plants. It's about people too. It's about the people who care about the plant, and so enough to speak out for them and to appreciate them. So because they don't have voices for themselves so far, as we know. Maybe they're yelling at us all the time. Stop. But I guess we're the ones who listen, right? We're the ones who actually can hear it and speak for them. So it's dedicated to Jessica and Don Mayall and Wayne Roderick and Dean Taylor. Oh, and that's there. That's it. You've endured the presentation. A little bit longer than an hour, with a little bit of a tech hiccup. This is the folks I get to work with, the folks that put up with me, Karah, Brendan, Isabel. This was when we did a lobbying day at the Capitol for the Power and Nature of 30 by 30, the effort to conserve 30% of the state by 2030. That's going to be a tough one. Then you can reach out to us by emailing conservation@cnps.org. My email address is my first initial of my last name and my last name @cnps.org. I'm very look-upable. I mean, it's not. They put me on all the emails and stuff, and so if you're a CNPS member, you've probably seen my name on things. I'm here. I don't go home until 6 o'clock tonight, so I'm ready to answer questions if there are any. Oh, thank you.
Nick, I was just going to break in if I can. This is Katie.
Sure.
Just to let folks know, if you have a question, if you would put it in the Q&A. And Nick, I'll go ahead and start by asking you the questions for folks online, and then we'll switch to folks in the room and kind of go back and forth as needed, if that works for you.
Great.
So I'm going to start with a question from Elizabeth Erickson. It says she's on the CNPS website And Wildflowers of California is sold out.
Interesting.
Any idea when it will be back in stock?
No idea. Well, I that's news to me. I can, God, we should be selling the thing. Interesting story about one of the benefits of working with Timber Press is that they're in charge of the distribution. They did all the printing and distribution and design for the book, which means that CNPS is not sitting on like a warehouse full of books. They printed 10,000 of these things. And then they're distributing them. So CNPS, I think we get a deal in our purchase of the books to resell. But that is to say, the book is available other places. But I can ask, if I remember, someone could send me an email to ask our folks to re-up their purchase of the book. And if you're itching to buy it, you can buy it, probably various other places. Okay.
Okay. So I have another question for you. This is anonymous, but the question is, the Phacelia stated 600 feet. Does that refer to elevation?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Okay, great. Are there other questions, or maybe Arlie, if you want to handle the questions in the room, and if anybody wants to put something else on the Q&A, we can deal with those online.
Right.
I have a question. In regards to native habitats, with like there being so many trends with hybrids and all these different things, how do we keep the native versus so many different mixtures and all these different trends that are going?
Okay, so I'll try and repeat the question for the online folks. So your question revolves around essentially the mixing of plant species generally via planting, right? And how we maintain populations of plants with their genetic integrity. Arlie's a better person to answer this question than I am.
Yes.
Yeah, genetic integrity with the fact that people are just moving plants around a lot these days. Lots of hybridization.
Like especially with like succulents, some of those other
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
a lot of grafting and things to create new.
Yeah. I guess like to validate your concern, yes, humans are doing a lot with moving plants around and manipulating native plants to create new, to make new selections. And although I don't know if there's a lot of breeding of native plants actively these days, I don't know if that. There certainly are a lot of horticultural selections that have been made and that are available in the trade. Hybridization in natural plant populations isn't necessarily a problem. It's a part of the evolutionary process. In fact, there's a degree of our diversity that owes itself to natural hybridization occurring, which is very different than the deleterious form of it, which means people moving genotypes around and then the genetic makeup of populations changing as a result of our own meddling. That is to say, that's the problem. The solution, well, the solution clearly is for there to be the availability and education to people about using local genotypes where that is most appropriate. And where that's most appropriate, I would say, is where people are planting abuts native habitats or is close enough for there to be gene flow. It's probably not as important in all places in the state. Like, I mean, there are very much landlocked places where planting things is probably not going to be as much of a problem. But certainly like here in this area, you're hard pressed to find a place that's not close to native habitats. And so I guess it's just education is important, and the availability of those locally appropriate plants, which is an issue. And I would just, Arlie, do you have anything to add? Right, yeah, that's right. So, well, yes, so there's the California Native Seed Strategy, which you can find online. I think if you Google California Native Seed Strategy, which recognizes this issue of availability of good seed sources, of locally available, locally appropriate seed sources, and the fact that we don't nearly have enough of our locally native seeds available even for restoration practitioners. And it charts a strategy towards achieving a better availability of appropriate seed sources. And so that is just to say that I've provided you with no definitive solutions. Yeah, there's a nursery right here, right?
Yes. Butterflies and plants, and they're grown beautifully in our yard. And there's another property where we have like maybe like a quarter of an acre. So it's just kind of like wondering if we go to these other nurseries. I don't know if they're or is it safer to buy just like
yeah, we have pros here.
Not here, they're big and beautiful. I mean,
yeah.
Surprised how they've grown. A lot of plant sales, we try to get as much as we can and regionally local plants and beautify. But we also bring in some cultivars that people have to have in their gardens in the city. I think I recommend planting some of those
right.
Yeah,
orchid. Yeah.
That's made available next to a rare plant population.
You know what's happening in my yard, and that like I live in Sacramento, and we've planted a mix of locally appropriate plants that tend to just be super aggressive because they're all these valley like grasses and stuff that like mugwort that just starts to like take over everything. But we've done a mix of things. We live like in the middle of the city, so like there isn't a bit of habitat anywhere nearby, unfortunately. So I'm not really worried about it. So I planted some of our native sages because I love them, and I have like white sage hybrids with other sages galore in my yard, and that made me think like, if that'd be another plant that if I was here, I would be really careful. I wouldn't want to bring like some like, weirdo sage selections into my yard because they are promiscuous. Yeah. Yeah, Desperado is one of them. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I guess it's just like it's really good that you're thinking about it because I think
because we have decent amount of land.
Yeah.
By the sages that were here on that like back table with some of the other ones, and they're all doing really well except one. I was at like 8 of the different that we bought, but then it's like today, Armstrong has lavender, so they always see. It's like I don't know where they're getting theirs from. Learning and
well, I think CNPS
in the rural part of Rosemark.
Yeah. Well, I think CNPS and I know Orchid May and Arlie and others have stuff to add too, but I think CNPS works at different levels with promotion of native plants and horticulture. There are the people who you're just trying to get to plant native plants, right? That you're just like take out your darn lawn and do something that's better. And then you might not get those people to do a restoration garden necessarily, but you might get them to throw a couple of native plants in a place that they've removed their lawn, and that's a win. And then there's that's like the early level, and then you're getting to the point where you're talking about where people are like wanting to do restoration of your properties and planting the right ecotypes. And I think we need to speak to both audiences, I think, because not everybody's going to want want a restoration garden, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, what can I do? Like,
Yeah.
what, as an individual who doesn't have this much time, and I love the work that you guys are doing, but what can I do in my yard to kind of support to make a difference?
Yeah.
Nick,
So thank you for that.
Or go ahead. Katie had something to say.
oh, Nick, I just wondered if you could repeat the question, please, for those online.
Oh, it was just more of a conversation.
Oh, okay.
I feel like we might be doing a disservice to the online people, because there was and then there was also you probably couldn't hear Arlie and Orchid's answers either.
That's fine. It was hard to tell if it was a question or not. So
Yeah, it was more just an open dialogue. I'll try to do better. Are there any more questions online, Katie?
Now.
One more question in the room. I'll repeat the question and try to include you online, folks. Go ahead.
It's been abused.
Yeah.
It's always abused. And Scott Wiener is trying, I think, to stop some of that abuse to allow more housing to be built within cities. How do you differentiate in terms of a position on a bill, especially SB 607?
Yeah.
That doesn't throw out the good reform,
Right.
with the over
So no, that's a great. So the question is, and I'll try to repeat this and tell me if I get it right, is that the gentleman in the back of the room pointed out that so I talked a bit about SB 607 being a bad bill introduced by Senator Wiener for reasons I've talked about. But the issue is that the reason why the bill has been introduced and other CEQA reform bills have been introduced is because there are issues with CEQA being abused by folks who are just trying to stop the development in their neighborhood. They use it as a tool, as a cudgel, essentially. And I think we all can agree that there are forms of development. I'll start to answer this at the same time. There are forms of development that for which maybe it's okay that there is a relaxed or lack of or a relaxation of CEQA review, expediting of review, so that and the lot that is a disturbed place in the middle of the city, that where a developer wants to build affordable housing, and nobody's going to really worry so much about the environment being greatly affected by this place. Maybe that person, that developer shouldn't have to go through all the hoops that a developer, who wants to build a new city on beautiful habitat has to go through. We think there is a lot of people will agree on those principles. There have been efforts, I can say, not that we've been close parts of this, to try and get SB 607 amended, altered to be along the lines of that Goldilocks version that I just spoke to. And I think that there's concern that there hasn't been a lot of give there. Now, I do also want to speak to the narrative that CEQA is abused. I'm not saying that hasn't happened. It has. But the research shows, the data shows, that only about 2% of projects in a given year that are evaluated under CEQA are litigated on. Furthermore, if you whittle that down, only a percentage of those are housing projects, and only a percentage of those housing projects are urban infill projects that are litigated on. So it really is a small number of litigation of litigation that has been filed, which is giving a bad name to CEQA. Not that it isn't a problem, but I think most of the people who have looked at it from a more academic perspective will say it isn't CEQA that is stopping urban, these urban infill projects. There are a variety of economic factors that make it more difficult for developers to do urban infill projects versus larger scale projects. And so what I would say is that it is a bill like 607 is too broad in its nature, even if some of the principles behind it actually may have a little bit of merit. And so I think I mean, especially now, I mean, with a lot of the threats to the federal regulations, and not that necessarily they're applied to CEQA project, but I think now is not the time for California to be ditching environmental rules at the time that the federal government is ditching its own. Like, I would like to see us be, pretty stand firm in habitat protection, because we stand to lose so much in other places. And so yes, I totally recognize your comment, and I think that it's a very smart comment, and it's unfortunately I don't have any great answers, except for the fact that most CEQA practitioners and advocates have determined that unfortunately we have to oppose SB 607 as it is drafted. There could be a version of it, an amended version, that maybe we could be neutral on, perhaps, but not at this point in time. Yeah. Is that it? Is it time for lunch? I'm always hungry though, so it doesn't really matter what time of the day. Good? Close it off. Are we? Oh, okay.
We usually do this?
Yes, we do.
Right, okay, I just wanted to thank everybody for attending. We have a nice audience here, present in the room, and I think online. And so Katie, I think you can close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nick.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, Katie.
And okay, thank you. Oh yeah, we can
Stop the whole thing.
I guess we can stop the share, and there we go.
Is that what I look like? I look crazy. Like all this bushy hair, and I need a haircut. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna stop that. I'm gonna end the webinar. Can I do that?